Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons, your favorite tabletop role-playing game podcast. I'm Shawn Merwood, here with the effervescent Teos Abadia. How's it going?
Fun. I've been reading about pirates for our main segment today.
Ooh,
So that's kind of cool.
Nice.
And looking forward to discussing that. I, in fact, had fun playing with pirates or being a pirate because we ran Pirate Borg again. Jeff Mueller ran it. It was great. Had super fun. I am still the captain. No one has shanked me yet, so that's really good.
We'll call that good. Nobody said I'm the captain now.
It came a little bit close, but I'm still there.
That's good. That's good. Well, the captains of our heart are our listeners, and we have some emails from them or messages from them, starting with Farquhar52, who came to us via YouTube with this question. What are your thoughts on RPGs having multiple modes of play? I heard the Alien RPG had 2 modes and started to wonder if it was important for a game to make its own distinctions about how it's meant to be played versus letting players and the game masters choose or discover new and interesting ways to play the game themselves. I had tooled with the idea of multiple play modes with a game I'm trying to write, where one mode is more comedic and goofy in tone with the game's subject matter, and the other mode takes the subject to a more serious and gritty tone. Would it be better to just make 2 different games if the modes differ too much, or should there be one mode and the players can use the system to play the construct of the game that they wish to play? Much like players using D&D system to play horror games when they could use Call of Cthulhu. Would it be a case of using the right system for the game you want, or using the system you like and molding it to work for the type of game experience that you want? Awesome question. This comes up a lot in different themes. So let's first and foremost define our terms here, because different modes of play can mean different things. In the context of this question, by mentioning the Alien RPG, you're talking about a specific campaign mode versus a one-shot mode. So that's one way to look at this question.
And if I can just very quickly say that in Alien, what it's trying to do is acknowledge that in the movies, death is pretty indiscriminate, right? Like it's obviously written by somebody, but to the viewer, it feels like, oh my goodness, all of a sudden this beloved character is gone, and the Sarge is gone, man. Like it just happens. And should that be the case? Well, it can be pretty fun to be that case. And if you've ever played in that mode of Alien, it is pretty nuts knowing that you at any point can just bite it. That is a certain kind of fun. But if what you're trying to do is have a longer campaign, well, this is pretty destructive. You'll just have to go through endless numbers of characters, and you'll need some, big ship full of people or something like that. And so the game acknowledges that and says, here's this other way you can play so that your characters can live longer, and you don't as often trigger the parts of the game that would cause you to just, fall into nothingness. And so that's a clever way to deal with the problem, right?
It is, with the understanding that by changing that, you're also changing the theme.
Sure.
Right. Sure. Because the theme of an Alien one shot is there is this unstoppable horror happening.
Yeah.
And you cannot kill it. You can, but it's highly unlikely. So it's who can survive, if anyone.
Sure. Right? Yes. Will anyone survive? Yeah.
Right. By taking that same world and putting it into a campaign mode, you necessarily have to change the theme.
That is true. Yeah.
In a short-term one-shot, the theme can still be corporations suck, and they will just eat up and chew through all resources, including human resources. So it's there, but it's not at the forefront.
Yeah.
So that then becomes the forefront of the campaign. With a more resource management, with a more focus not on this short-term survival, but on a longer-term survival.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine. Like a long-haul space trucking game
right.
could be very fun.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to go to Alien for that. Right? I can understand that you could. That's not what I want. When I set down the Alien box in front of me, I want that experience.
Yeah.
Right. So
Well, yeah, I mean, I had that experience with Blade Runner, right? We've talked about on the show
right.
where I had to change the critical rules because
Yep.
it's in theory a RPG about questioning what it is to be human and your character's humanity for the players. And yet,
Mhm.
at any moment, in fact, the odds that I found was every battle, there's a pretty solid chance one of the characters is just going to have a horrendous
Yep.
critical failure. And well, that ends their story and this whole discovery that we're in theory why we're here. And so that becomes a bit of a disconnect. And I think that if what you want to do is sort of explore horror with your character in space, that's a totally valid thing to want to do. True, it doesn't, I guess, one way to look at it is this, right? Most role-playing games, D&D included, don't actually represent the fiction. They multiply it by the number of players, right? So like everybody is Sigourney is actually how D&D works, right? Everybody is, pick a fantasy novel, you're all that person, right? You're all the chosen ones.
Yep.
And so Aliens in some way is we might expect Alien to play the same way in that sense, right? We all get to be Sigourney Weaver. How do we pull it off? Well, the one set of rules don't allow that. They treat you like extras. You are all extras. And you're lucky to get Sigourney Weaver status.
Yep. Yeah. It's true. It's true. And that's why it's hard for this nihilistic horror to exist in this campaign where you are going to survive, most likely. So when we look, though, at modes of play in terms of D&D, including 5th edition D&D, this is where it gets interesting. Because we've said before that the D&D rules are more flexible to run a variety of different kinds of games. And I think it's reasonable to say that D&D can cater to many flavors of play. And sometimes it might even be true. Because I'm in the process right now of finalizing the Grim Hollow Transform books. And so we are adding rules to turn D&D from this you play an adventuring day and suddenly you're all fine and dandy the next day and all ready to go back at it again. Use an adjustment to those rules to say, you just went through a really rough day. You're not coming out of it sparkling the next day, right? You still have some work to do to get back all of those resources. And it doesn't take a lot. It just takes the tweaking of those rest mechanics to do that. So in that sense, the game mode is different, but the rules can say the same. And we did it for Acquisitions Incorporated,
right?
Which is why it was named by Gamer Magazine the number one setting for expert players looking for something different. Because it was you adventure like you normally would. And then you go about these different goals that don't involve combat necessarily, that don't involve the same sort of exploration.
And things
combat
like having the impetus that every NPC you meet maybe should be your employee. And so the players start having that in their brains of we might actually want to employ even the foes that we can run across. So.
Right. And every interaction has a possibility of a business a business growth. Right. So in that sense, you're still using the D&D rules, but you're sprinkling in these things that change the flow of the whole campaign, not just the individual game, but the whole campaign.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore what I'm hearing you say, which is that when we say D&D handles a lot of genres well, that's not the same as modes of play. Right. And so modes of play really is where your rules need to change to allow a different way that you're engaging with the story. It's not about it being sci-fi. It's more like if it's sci-fi but a whole merchant system or something like that really changes the nature of how you play, then you need that separate rules. And that's why Alien does that, is because it's saying, these characters, they've got to somehow survive longer to tell a bigger story. So I must have another way of dealing that, right? And you could imagine other games that are high lethality, like Pirate Borg that I played this weekend. If you wanted to maybe have a completely different way that you play, then that could happen, right? Or kingdom building, right? If the whole idea is that you must each have a ship, well, now we need another mode of play, ship mode, right? Or something like that.
Right. Yep. And so to answer the original question, should I think about making two different games? I would say no. Mm-hmm. I would say make a game, see how that game works. If you can use the basis of that game to add a particular mode of play, do that. If the onus of that work gets too great, and you realize that even the basic structure of my game doesn't support this other mode of play, then you can go off and do that. But always try to work from one particular core set of mechanics, because if you try to make two, you might make two that don't work. So at least make one, make that one work, and then you can branch off from that.
Yeah, and because making one is already a ton of work. It's difficult. It's a challenge. We acknowledge that as creators. And so when you bite off that much, it's a lot to bite off, and it may not be worth it. I think we're going to imagine it from the comedy standpoint, is if you think of like the Miles Morales Spider-Man movies, the Spider-Verse series where it sort of does things like, and also the animated cartoon pig can be in this movie. If you're trying to sort of allow for that to happen, or to say now everybody be cartoon pigs, and it's that sort of falling anvils type thing, then maybe, you have something in there that allows for that if you don't normally have that. But I would, as you say, I would first try to get a game to where I really like it, and then ask that question of whether it needs, anvil mode or something like that. And maybe it's done really easily. And even Aliens, it doesn't have that much to it, right? It's a couple of switches you're flipping. So as you design, you could keep that in mind. But I agree with you that I would try to get one ironclad, feels great game, then secondarily address that. But ultimately, especially with not D&D, any non-D&D RPG, which are all the others, you want to kind of think, what is it what's going to draw my audience? Make that game is generally a better strategy.
And you can, to an extent, trust game masters and players to make the tweaks they need to play the game that they want. Yeah. Yes, it is very important that your base game understand what it is and the play that is supposed to come from it, but players and game masters are going to do what they want to do. So you can allow them to do that as well. And that sort of goes into our second question here from Chris G8989 via YouTube, who says, with the new SRD 5.2, 5.2.1 now, being released, what advice do you have for budding dreamers who are looking to get into the creation of some 2024 5e digital products? What are the pitfalls? What are the do's and don'ts? And I just started a list because it's a list.
Yeah.
And so my for just like brand new folks who know D&D but maybe haven't created anything yet, my advice is to plan carefully, create joyfully, expect nothing, and hope for everything. So that's a lot going into one thing, but it's do it because you enjoy it, but also plan for success in case it does work. I would like to start with just that sort of ethos going into
along that line. I have a very similar kind of thing that I talk about in one of the first Success in RPGs videos that I did, which is, you could sometimes think, well, what is it that will sell? That's the wrong way to look about it, right? Like first of all, find out what you want to make. Like if you start designing monsters and you find, boy, this saps me of energy, never design a monster again if you can help it. And it doesn't matter if that sells or not sells. You will make better creations when they're creations that you love doing, and figuring out what you actually like doing and in what way you like to approach it is really like one of the biggest parts of the ball game as a creator.
Yep. And over time, as you create what you love, you will see how people react to that. And their interaction with your stuff will tell you what other people want too. So it's not necessarily only make what other people want, but learn what people want.
Hmm.
You love creating monsters, create those monsters, but then look and see. And if people are buying, more high CR monsters with layers, maybe you want to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, if
It,
people are commenting most on your low level creatures or your humanoid creatures, maybe stick with a book of humanoid bows. Uh,
yeah, and I'm gonna jump one of on your list here to start
yeah.
small, even if you dream big, which is a great statement you wrote here. Because if we go back to that, what you just said, right? When you are
Hmm.
experimenting to find out what people like, don't make a book of 5,000 monsters when you're not sure what kind of monsters your audience will like. And it will be your
Hmm.
audience that buys them, not all gamers, right? So you're only going to be
Yeah.
able to reach a certain group of people. And you may find that they love X type of monster, right? So if you make a giant book
Hmm.
with all these things, well, then you're going to limit the appeal to the audience that you're starting to attract. So starting small is a great way to find what people like. You make 3 products, they really like that one. If it's something that you also enjoyed making, then you can make more things like that. But it's like fishing with different types of bait, right? And
Yep.
seeing what works. Okay, well, I actually enjoy that too. Now I'll make more of that.
Yep. And another good point about starting small is you will make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You will learn lessons along the way. It's better to make 5 monsters and learn what you did wrong than make 500 monsters and make the same mistake on all 500 monsters,
Yeah.
where you could just make five. Oh, okay, these are the things I need to change. This is the direction I need to go. Now I'll make 20.
Yeah.
Okay, now I will learn. Now I will make 50. And you are learning those lessons sooner.
Yeah.
This is just me, but don't spend money that you aren't ready to lose on things like art, like layout, like advertising, and so
Mm-hmm.
on. Uh, Especially at the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a self-made billionaire and you want to, put out a huge 300-page book right away and pay for, the top-notch artists in the industry and editors and layout folks and advertising, go for it. But chances are that if you don't have that money, you're not necessarily going to make it back through sales.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so,
Yeah.
so start small, learn what needs you have, and then if you do need to spend some money on those things, you'll know the best place to allocate that money.
Yeah, and a big part of success is drawing an audience. It's not
Hmm.
just related to the quality of what you can create. And you can look at any number of Kickstarters that when you go,
Right.
how did this person I've never heard of achieve all this success? Oh, they have a YouTube channel with, this many thousands of people following it. Well, that,
Yeah.
they had an audience that was ready and liked what they did and how they approached things, who just assumed that their first creation would be amazing, right? And
Hmm.
hopefully it is. So you think about that idea of an audience doesn't mean you have to be on YouTube, be where you like being, but find the
Hmm.
place you like to be. And in that place, share things so that people
Hmm.
start seeing what kind of things you create. They start get excited by it. They start to want to then actually buy something that you package together. And then the more things that you start getting out there, you build that reputation and so on.
Use existing products as models to get a feel for what works, what you like,
Mm.
what doesn't work. Uh, look at something if you're putting something up on the DM's Guild, you're putting up 5 subclasses. Look at subclasses out there. Look at products that have 5 subclasses. Is it just the rules? Is it the rules plus a bunch of lore? Which do you like? Which do you prefer? Which do you engage with? And then just see what works. See what works
Hmm.
for you, not necessarily what works as best-selling products, but having that model going in will give you a firm foundation for your creations, and then you can deviate from that in ways that make you feel like it's your work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, those are our 2 questions this week. We'll have more coming next time, but we want to jump into our news and commentary, starting with more news on the Diamond and Alliance deal that was and then wasn't and then was and then wasn't and now might be, but definitely not in ways that we had originally thought. All right, so last week we saw Alliance withdrawing from purchasing Diamond distributors after suing them to be able to do so. And we wondered what was going on. And now, Teos, we know. And
we do.
Go for it.
Yeah. So Alliance accused Diamond of fraud and is suing to cover millions of dollars they spent in the halted acquisition of Diamond. They want the $8.5 million in earnest money that they put up front to do this bidding, plus accrued interest and other damages. Why are they suing? Why is there fraud? And there are 3 really interesting bits that come out of the documents and what's been produced in this court case. So the first is that Diamond deliberately lied about their situation while being bankrupt, both by concealing documents and lying. Specifically, they falsified information and withheld documents around Wizards of the Coast ending distribution with Diamond on December 24th of last year. So Alliance found something that hinted at this, and on a call with both Wizards and Diamond said, hey, is this true that you've cut off distribution? And Wizards said, yeah, we ended distribution on December 24th. And, Diamond's just sitting there quietly, apparently. And so that's the first thing is that, wow, way to go, Diamond, with falsifying, withholding, and lying. The other thing is that because of this, so for a while it looked like this auction step was going to just fall apart. Like, who's going to buy them? Will they be so weak that nobody will buy them? We'll get to that in a second. But the other and Alliance actually said to Diamond, now that we know this, we want to offer a much, much lower price based on losing this business. And Diamond said no. So that's why Alliance said, well, then we're out of here and we're suing to recover our damages because you lied to us. The second thing is reveals another step, as we talked about with Penguin Random House, where Wizards has ended distribution, right? They clearly think that they are better off on their own. And maybe this is because of Diamond. So there was some learning, I think on the call, Wizards of the Coast disclosed that business of Wizards of the Coast had declined by more than 8% over the last 4 years, during which period each of Wizards of the Coast's other 4 distributors had significantly increased their sales. So it may be as simple as just Diamond was doing poorly, so let's just end Diamond. But it could also be this idea of, hey, we don't actually need that many distributors in these old ways of distributing, maybe in part due to direct sales and things like that. The third part that's interesting is that 25% of all Diamond revenue was coming from Wizards of the Coast, right? Magic the Gathering, D&D, things like that. And this was the largest single source of their revenue. So Wizards of the Coast through Diamond was bigger for Diamond than Marvel, DC, and everything, when the way everybody thinks of Diamond is a comic distributor, first and foremost. So that's pretty unexpected and an even bigger blow for Diamond that they're not part of this, and for whoever buys them. Thoughts there, Shawn?
No, if all of this is true, right? All this is in court documents, allegedly, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But if that's the case, we can see why, if Diamond works like this, why Wizards of the Coast would not want to be involved in that.
Yeah.
And they could find other methods of distribution. It also shows why everyone is backpedaling or was backpedaling so quickly to get out of the let's buy Diamond industry. But the story continues because on April 30th, we learned something else, Teos. Take it away.
Universal Distribution and the company Sparkle Pop, which is somehow tied to Ad Populum, which is the company that owns various things, including WizKids. So these two joined together and have offered to buy Diamond. Universal will acquire the assets of Alliance game distributors. Ad Populum will require the assets of Diamond comic distributors, Diamond book distributors, Diamond Select toys and collectibles, Collectible Grading Authority, and other relating assets. So you can see how complicated all this is. Apparently, the part that Universal is acquiring is for roughly $42 million, with some adjustments based on all kinds of things they'll calculate out. But that gives you a thought of, feeling for part of the scale of what they're purchasing. So it looks like things are going through. This has been approved initially. And so, I don't know that there is no chance of it falling apart. We'll see if there's more to this wrinkle, but maybe we're done. Maybe we've finally reached, but it was painful. And we've learned a lot about the fragility, I think, of our industry. And that there'll continue to be some fragility, right? When Wizards was 25% of all of Diamond's revenue, and now that stream that went through Diamond no longer includes the Wizards products, it weakens everybody else who's involved, that they now have a much smaller piece that they're working with. And I think that distribution in general has fragmented, where pre-pandemic, it was kind of largely through Diamond. That has vastly changed to where there are a lot of different ways that people are selling, and not just the kind of Kickstarter concept, but just a lot of different ways that things to get to stores. On the role-playing game side, we've heard people like, Kelsey Dion has said, I'm not going to sell through typical distribution because that's just, you lose too much doing so, right? So we may see a lot of changes still yet in this industry because of how fragile it all is.
But what's not fragile is the new Sage Advice and Errata page. In fact, we are very blown away by the time, the care that has been put into this. So Teos, lead us on this little tour of the Sage Advice and Errata webpage.
Yeah, it's impressive. So I thought, there would just be some like simple old school webpage with some questions and answers, but it's all nicely divided and grouped up. We have all of the errata there in D&D Beyond format and PDF. And there's a legacy section, so you can see the old 2014 core books errata. So if you're missing something like errata for Tasha's or older adventures or anything like that, you can get this on this same Sage Advice and errata site. The errata is great. The only thing I saw missing, I actually looked at my old files and compared. There was an old legacy Sage Advice that is not available on there. And we'll talk about at the very end one of the things that contrast between what they had ruled before and now. So you won't find that document, but you'll find all of the other things, such as the rulings for Sage Advice for 2024. And Shawn, there's a lot here. It's a long document, and one of the first questions I had is, where's this come from? And that is the part that's least clear. I saw somebody on Bluesky had reached out and been told, like, we currently don't have a way for you to submit questions. So it's sort of unclear where this is, is this just internal folks thinking these are things people want to hear about?
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that because it doesn't have the typical question answer to it that we sometimes see in Sage Advice. We see some things like some clarity for hiding, that a creature finding you, such as through blind sight, true sight, they have now found you, so you are no longer hidden. But they don't exactly do things that I think really speak to the multitude of questions that people are asking about hiding. Like the way it's worded in 2024, it's unclear whether they're saying that when one person has found somebody, they are then found by everybody on that side.
Right.
There's some things like that. Just when you look at the wording, it's just unclear. And I don't know that the team has really gone and looked at the questions people are asking, but what do I know?
Yeah.
And there's a whole list of these things. I don't know, Shawn, if any of these stood out to you, some of the ones that we copied here.
Well, the invisibility hiding one was one of the strange cases for me. And if you don't remember correctly, I don't know the exact DC. I think it was DC 15.
Right.
Where if you make a DC 15 hide check, you have the invisible condition, which seems strange when you think of all of the creatures that might be able to see you. Yeah. Why are you invisible from one but not another? And Why is DC-15 chosen?
Yeah, so DC-15 is like your threshold, right? You must make a DC-15 to be hidden and gain the visibility condition from being hidden. And of course, you have to meet the prerequisites for being hidden, like cover or something like that, obscurement. But once you meet that threshold, then what we care about is, well, then how high do you score? And that's what other people will oppose. But it's not clear exactly how all these things come together. The one that I really thought was interesting was around the ready action. They said you can take the ready action as a preparatory action rather than a commitment. If then you want to take an opportunity attack, you can do so using your reaction for this instead of taking your planned action. Right? So I say I ready to fire my arrow at the first goblin that comes through the door. And then, like a human bandit runs by me and I go, well, actually, forget that. I'm going to take my opportunity attack or my reaction to take this opportunity attack. But then they said later, if you're ready to cast a spell, you immediately expend the resources to cast the spell and lose the spell slot and other resources, even if later you don't use that ready action and cast it. I thought, that sure doesn't add up.
But it does. To me, it does because, well, when you're using your action, either way, if you ready an attack, you've used your action to have this thing about to happen. So it would be odder for me to say you're using a resource, which is an action. You're using a resource, which is a spell slot. It's all being used. But if you want
not
to
down 2 arrows or an arrow or something like that, it's like I don't know. I find it strange. Yeah, I don't know. I'd like one or the other. I find it.
I'm not like ready to die on the hill.
Sure.
But it does make sense to me in terms of, I mean, rules wise, it makes sense to me. Maybe like realism wise, it doesn't. But if the spell that you're going to cast is a action spell, you have to have it
start casting it and
start casting, right?
I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a little okay. But then I would say take away that first part you just told me. Like, no, if you notched your arrow to shoot it, you can't then take an opportunity action because you've committed. But this idea that you haven't committed, but you have when it's a spell, I find that a little contrary. But anyway.
Well, unless you can shoot something as an opportunity attack, you would still have to kick it, right? You'd use an unarmed strike because you would have the bow and arrow in your hand. I can see the argument, but I can also see the opposite side. So,
then they had some things like, could you prepare as a spellcaster? Could I rest, prepare some spells now, leave some slots open, and later stop and sort of fill up on the rest? And the answer is no. It's interesting. You have to fill them all up now. Help action, has to be done with somebody that you're essentially adjacent to, but you can move away after you do that. So you can go up, distract them, quote unquote, move away, and then later on, when it's someone else's turn to attack that creature, you have still granted advantage, even though you're not next to them now. It's just some interesting rulings like that are non-intuitive, right?
I didn't read this. So could you go up to someone that you're trying to help pick a lock? Use the help action and then move away and still have them be right.
That's interesting.
For this, I could understand. You've distracted them, and then they've turned. You move.
It's just one of those things that's non-intuitive, right? Like in general, I think that one of the things that D&D, in my opinion, here's Teos' opinion moment. The game is best when it's intuitive, and the more they go, I wouldn't have expected that. Then, and to me, this is a sort of I wouldn't have expected that I can go up to an adjacent target. I can go up to the troll and I can distract them so that you can stab them. This is all intuitive. The idea that I can now stop being next to the troll, I can explain it, but it's non-intuitive to me. It starts, or less intuitive, let's say. it's just and then
What's less intuitive to me there though is the fact that you need to be adjacent to it to distract it.
yeah.
Right. If we're saying that the help is a distraction,
Sure.
why can't I distract it from 30 feet away? Right. So we could, we could go around and around and around. And at some point we have to step away from intuitive. I agree with you that it should be intuitive.
Yeah.
But at some point we need to step away from intuitive to say the rules are going to trump I hate how that word has been absolutely destroyed. Yes, let me step back there. We have to leave intuition behind and just say the rules work this way. Now, I'm not even saying that in this case the rules work better for that reason, but it definitely, I can see why a person would want to be able to move as well. So
yeah, a few others that I liked. When a spell has several attacks like Scorching Ray, you can choose targets and resolve them one by one. So you don't have to pick them all at the start. So you can say, I fire a magic missile, it drops that guy. I fire another one. Oh, now, that second person did not drop, so I'll fire again at them. So you can do that with these kinds of spells where there are different attacks. I guess magic missile doesn't have attacks, but with Scorching Ray or Melf's Acid Arrow, you can do that. The whole thing around a spellcasting focus always twists my brain around, and this is one of these cases where this explanation twisted my brain. So they say a cleric with an emblem on their shield, which is a thing you can do, is wielding a mace. Shield in one hand, mace in the other, but your shield has this emblem, which is your spellcasting focus. When the spell requires a material component and a somatic component, the shield acts as the spellcasting focus, and the hand holding the shield can do the somatic component. Okay?
Yeah.
But if the spell requires a somatic component but does not have a material component, then you have to unequip either the shield or mace hand to have a free hand for the somatic component. Yeah. Meaning only when the shield functions as a spellcasting focus can that same hand be used to do the somatic component. And I just find that to be complete junk.
Yeah, in that case, the intuitive part says, why would you not be able to do it somatically with one and not the other? Yeah. And I can't think of a rules reason why not to.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming through the spellcasting focus, but yeah.
This question right here is why 1 million people play D&D and 10 million people don't. is because we have this granularity in the rules that make it that make it hard.
Yeah, there are several clarifications on Dispel Magic that I thought were pretty useful. So things like examples of instantaneous effects like Animate Dead, they're no longer the spell. They can't. The spell can no longer be dispelled. A good explanation of the difference between a ready Dispel Magic with how Counterspell works. I enjoyed that. Monsters can't use multi-attack or breath weapons as an opportunity attack. And then my absolute favorite was there was this bizarre ruling in the 2014 Sage Advice, which said that you could gain the magical bonus, but not the shield bonus, of a +2 shield if you were holding it and not donning it. So like a wizard could just carry a shield, but I'm not equipping it. I could just carry it and you'd get +2 to your armor class. And I thought that was I did not agree with that. Now they have specifically added an example. Can you gain the magical bonus of a +2 shield if you're holding the shield without taking an action to don it? No, you must don a shield to gain its benefits, and that would require proficiency. So they've changed that out from the old version. And I wonder if that's because Jeremy Crawford's not there anymore, or if this was just somebody changing their mind. But either way, I'm so glad we can no longer do that.
Yep. I had one question, though, about the SRD going from 5.2 to 5.21.
Yeah.
And those changes were listed on the website, but they were not listed in the SRD itself. In either as a list of changes or as like red text I've seen them do in the past with changes. Is that normal to not call out changes in a document like that? We haven't seen enough of this SRD change from Wizards to to note that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a new approach that they have, but I agree with you that it would be much better. Like right now, it's in the is it in the change log? There was some place where they mentioned what had changed. No, it's not in the change log.
There was nothing in the change log. It was the website said something to the effect
community
of
update.
this is
the community up. Oh yeah, so that's a disaster. I would say. Look at me being so opinionated today, but so apologies for that. But it's in the community update that it says SRD 5.2.1 is now available. The changelog still is stuck on 5.2. And so there are 15 magic items that they accidentally didn't add. A few other minor changes. The Golem stat block, Iron Golem had been the Knight stat block. They've corrected that. The Octopus has been added. But no, they have not sort of redlined it. And I liked when they did that. In the old errata documents, they would do that. They would add new things in red text.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful to see what changed from one to the other. But yeah, they should definitely either the changelog is a changelog or it isn't. So let's keep that consistency.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure I didn't miss something, because
that's a good call.
My life becomes a little more difficult when I have to read the entire 100-page or 200-page or 400-page document to figure out what was changed.
Exactly.
But what's worse than not seeing the changes is when journalism, as we know it, comes to an end. And that is what we're stepping toward here, as Polygon, the game news website, has been sold to, quote, click farm powerhouse Valnet, and many reporters and writers have been laid off. Anything to say about that, Teos?
I hate all of it. I mean, Polygon was a pretty reasonable place. But overall, I feel like all of these sites have cut down on the number of editors or fact checkers. A lot of these sites feel like, hey, would you like to submit an article, get paid very little for it, and we'll call it news, and we'll pretend that you know what you know without actually checking. And so, I read a lot of things online that I'm like, wow, this is so limited in scope. And like I love it when a DM is new, right? I don't love it when a journalist is new, because they don't know all these things. And that's fine. Like, I'm all for a new journalist writing, but then you need that expert person who comes in and says, well, kid, here's the way it is, And I feel like that has disappeared. And so in this case, it's another disaster of, arguably one of the best places being sold off, and all these people have been laid off. It's full of all the tech bro type talk about, maximizing value. It even uses the word muscle, and it just and there was a quote in Kotaku that
this quote's amazing.
Yeah, what was the quote? Where was the quote?
In a report earlier this year by The Wrap, many former contributors accused Valnet's current media holdings of being exploitative content mills. And here's the quote: "In journalism, there are really bad jobs, and then there is a place like Valnet," a former Collider contributor told The Wrap. "It's one of the worst places that I've ever worked, and is probably one of the worst journalism publications I've ever seen." And so, that's coming from a journalist who went through, the basics of a journalism career, if not like a full education, and then worked there, had to say.
And it's rough because, I mean, you and I have been in this industry for a long time, so we bring some amount of experience, but I'm not a journalist. And I don't like, this is not my job. This is a thing I do for fun, you know, and I try to be as smart about it as possible, and I try to check things, but I'm not a journalist. I don't go out to my sources and, do all the things that a journalist would do. And yet I feel like sometimes I'm like, boy, I don't know that anyone else is breaking down the Wizards of the Coast financials like we are, or has a grasp of the history of the OGL the way we do. And that saddens me, because there should be journalism for our industry that has this kinds of expertise. And so the more that this happens, I don't know how we get to that, Shawn. So I don't know.
I don't know if we I don't know if we do get to that because there has to be money involved.
Mhm.
And when the industry itself is relatively small compared to other industries, the journalism and the accessories, the things going on around it also do not bring in a lot of money. So, but you know what? I don't count on money because I have DM David, and we haven't checked in with DM David for a while. And his blog this week was D&D 2024 ignored one of 5th edition's original goals, losing something we all still want in D&D. And he grabbed me with the headline. I have to admit that was some good
Yeah, it's
good
good.
clickbait there. I'm like, okay, what did we ignore? And what he talked about is close to my heart, so I wanted to bring it up. Uh, One of the 2014 design goals was about speed of play
Mhm.
and being able to run a complete game in a very short amount of time. So we talked about Mike Merle's putting out those articles about this particular topic, talked about the adventures that had been written to be run in an hour, which I had a little bit to do with.
Just a bit.
And then as 5th edition has evolved, it's made design choices that favor complexity over speed of play. Uh, he compares the Bardic Inspiration of 2014 to the Flash of Genius now, with more player control that requires more decisions and time to make use of the benefits. The Twilight Domain for clerics found in Tasha's requires constant retracking of temporary hit points.
Yeah.
Design of 2024, as we've talked about with the weapon mastery feats or weapon mastery features, baking in more time for all the attacks of the characters that use that feature. And David ends with this quote: "The challenge of creating a fast game matches the challenge of eating healthy at the buffet.
Mhm.
Designers face countless temptations, flavorful design ideas that just add a few seconds to an attack. No more than 30 seconds to a turn. Just one treat can't hurt, right?" And then the team behind the 2024 faced the extra challenge because management insisted on an update with enough new character features to entice players to replace their old books. No one sells cauliflower at a carnival. Is the candy worth the slower game?
Beautiful.
And it is beautiful. And I will admit, for some people, it totally is.
Mhm.
And maybe even for a majority or a very significant minority of people, that extra 30 seconds on a turn, that extra 3 minutes in a round, that extra 15 minutes in a combat, that extra hour in a 4 hour adventure where you're in combat is fine because they love the tactics and they love that decision making.
But
But
Mhm.
does it benefit the game as a whole is the question.
Yeah, because the thing is, when we look at our character sheet, things like weapon mastery are awesome. Why would I not want to knock every monster prone? And that just seems so fun. But what we don't kind of comprehend as a human being is at the end of the session where you go, yeah, that was a little not great. And can't put my finger on why, right? And the why of it can be because everybody's turn took so long.
Yeah,
And you spent so much time waiting for those other people's turns to finish. They themselves were quite happy during their turn, but it was
sure.
sluggish. Also, the amount of time that you all spent looking down at your character sheets versus looking at each other and the DM and communicating ideas that don't have to do with your character sheet. The more that your character sheet pulls you in and requires you to look, and I just played a bard at Winter Fantasy where I had to really work hard to keep my eyes up because I had so many things that I could do with a bonus
Mhm.
action alone that I kept rewriting lists, different ways of the things I could do so that I could do them quickly and still think creatively outside of those things. But it's like you have to, it's
Right.
a struggle. It competes and it feels fun because look, my character does all these neat candy things. But more fun is role playing and interacting with everybody and coming up with cool
Mhm.
plans. And those things tug at each other. And I think
Mhm.
that as humans, we're not very good at seeing that larger impact of the game. And
Yeah.
so it falls on designers to be the adults in the room, right? And limit candy the way parents have to, because every kid thinks they should have all the candy in the world. And it's the parent that must go, no, you need healthy eating habits that'll last you a lifetime.
Yep. So thank you, DM David, for that relook at this topic that speaks to us. On the EN World Publishing front, they have relaunched the EN5ider magazine, where the S in EN5ider is a 5, and it's not EN5ider, it's EN5ider.
Mm-hmm.
So EN5ider is relaunching, but let's call it EN5ider for now. They have relaunched this magazine that has been active for over 10 years. So the first issue has the theme of folk heroes. The issue includes 9 rustic magic items from the folk heroes armory, a villain NPC, an adventure for 4th level, bounty hunter guilds, and a bounty hunter board handout, or several, using encounters from previous issues. You can see example pages from this on EN World, and EN5ider is available through a Patreon as a subscription starting at $10 a month for the PDF, 20 for a PDF and print without shipping, or 25 for a PDF and print including shipping. And we have links to that in our show notes. And last but not least, one little thing in our creator corner, I want to thank Michael Henderson, otherwise known on the internet as Rel, for a copy he sent of his Distal RPG. Here's the book right here. Ooh. Michael was a co-host on the show once when Teos was out, where we talked about game design. You can see this game, which I had not dug deeply into it, but I read a review of it that compared it favorably as a combination of 5e and the DCC. You can check it out at distalrpg.com, and you can go to Rel's YouTube channel to see his past videos on game design.
Cool. A lot of my friends like Dungeon Crawl Classics, so I'm sure they will like Distal. Awesome.
There you go. That was our news and commentary section for this week.